Alright, hey guys, we're going to try something new today. This could blow up, or it could be really awesome. But today we're going to look at how a bill becomes a law. And I'd like to begin kind of in a weird spot. I'd like to begin with a brief lesson in Buddhism. Buddhism faithfully insists that you and I do not exist. Alright, so according to Buddhism, you do not exist any more than the table I am sitting at or the car sitting in your driveway. At least, things do not exist in and of themselves, right? The table I'm working at is not a table based on any intrinsic tableness. Rather, it is the aggregate of several components. So your car is the aggregate of the engine, the drivetrain, the axles, the frame, and the wheels, and of course, finally, you, the driver. All of those things, apart from each other, are not a car. Only when they come together are they a car. So it only exists as the components come together in a very specific kind of way. Just similarly, you are the aggregate of your unique consciousness, your perception, your feelings, your volition, and your physical form. The components are what matters. In APUS government, we are not so interested in the lawmaking process itself. Right? That's easy enough. There's countless charts and diagrams and Schoolhouse Rock videos to explain it. Rather, we're interested in the components themselves. Some of these components are pretty obvious. A bill, and the House, and the Senate, and the President. Other components are less obvious, like the iron triangle that we discussed in class with interest groups, congressional committees, and executive bureaucracies. So let's begin with what's easiest. The bill. A bill is a proposed law presented to the House or the Senate for consideration. And bills begin with an idea. And ideas can come from the president, or more accurately, somebody working for the president, interest groups, or even constituents, like the voters. According to Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 of the Constitution, bills are for raising revenue must originate in the House. So anything having to do with the budget or taxes must originate in the House. Any other bill may be introduced in any other chamber, or either of the chambers. Now, there are two very specific kinds of bills. There are public bills and private bills. Public bills affect the entire nation. Those are things like tax measures. They affect you and your parents' parents and their wallets. Private bills apply to certain persons or places. For example, Congress once passed a bill to pay a sheep rancher $85,000 for losses resulting from grizzly bear attacks. The bears had been relocated to Yellowstone National Park, a department of the national government, where the rancher grazed his sheep, and so they compensated him for his losses. There are also resolutions, concurrent and joint. So resolutions are similar to bills, and when they are passed, they have the force of law. Joint resolutions most often deal with temporary or unusual matters, like appropriating funds for inaugural ceremonies or proposing amendments to the United States Constitution. While concurrent resolutions deal with matters in which the House and the Senate must act together. Except concurrent resolutions don't have the force of law. They are more about the Congress stating a position on a specific matter, right? If they're going to oppose the president about foreign affairs or foreign policy, they're going to issue a concurrent resolution stating it as such. All right, so we're going to move on to Section 2 and talk about when a bill is introduced into the House. And you should be pretty familiar with some of this stuff because we begin with congressional committees. When a bill is introduced in the House, it is numbered and titled and submitted to the congressional record, which is this massive, lengthy, and exceedingly boring record of the day-to-day business of the legislative branch. This is what they call the bill's first reading. It's then printed and distributed to House members, all 435, and referred to its appropriate jurisdiction in the standing committees. Since 1975, bills can see sequential referrals to multiple committees for consideration. But remember that appropriate jurisdiction is the important part about standing committees. An agriculture bill is going to be sent to the Agriculture Standing Committee and then divided up into its appropriate subcommittees. Bills are made or killed in committees, and most bills are killed. In the 111th Congress, 10,778 measures were introduced. 971 of them were reported to a committee. 1,315 measures were passed, and only 383 actually became a law. So thousands of bills are going to be pigeonholed. They're killed or buried in the committee process. Bills that are not killed in committee undergo a rigorous process of debate, amendments, and rewrites. This is what's called the markup session. And it usually happens in the various subcommittees of the Standing Committee, which is what you saw in the video clip of Stephen Colbert. That's part of that markup session. So when a bill survives the markup and is reported by the committee to be debated on the floor, it must be placed on the calendar by the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is a standing committee of the House of Representatives that provides special rules under which specific bills can be debated, amended, and considered by the House. If you think being on the Rules Committee is a powerful position, you're absolutely correct. Since the majority party gets to elect and select committee chairmen and women, the majority party then gets to determine whether or not a bill is considered and how it will be considered on the House floor. The Rules Committee gets to set the conditions for debate. So we have what's called open rules and closed rules. A closed rule prohibits any amendments to any bills that are up for a vote on the House floor, unless they are recommended by the committee reporting the bill. So if a bill goes to the floor and the Rules Committee says that it's closed, you can't add any amendments to it unless those amendments are proposed by the subcommittee. So if it's an agriculture bill and the subcommittee on dairy and poultry wants to add an amendment to it protecting poultry farmers in Alabama, they are allowed to do that, but nobody else is. When something is given an open rule, this permits general debate and allows members to offer amendments throughout the debate process. If a bill reaches the floor, it receives a quote-unquote second reading in the House. Many bills that pass the House are minor and receive very little opposition. Things like naming of a federal courthouse. Others will be considered by what is called the Committee of the Whole, which includes all 435 members of the House, but is not the House itself. Okay, so this is pretty weird, and it deserves closer attention. The Committee of the Whole is designed to expedite the legislative process, because the rules are much less strict than the House itself. So, for example, in order for a bill to be considered in the House, a majority of the full membership, 218 out of 435, must be present. But in the Committee of the Whole, only 100 members need to be present. So it takes a whole lot less time to whip up votes and to debate and amend things with 100 people in the House than it does to have 218 or more. When the Committee of the Whole convenes, the Speaker will step down since the House is no longer technically in session. It is now the Committee of the Whole. General debates will begin, and during the second reading, amendments will be proposed. At the conclusion of the Committee of the Whole, the House will come back into session, the Speaker will resume the chair, and the House will adopt the committee's work. And it's now ready for its official debate on the House floor. Because the House is so large, it has numerous rules limiting the debate process. House majority and minority leaders will decide in advance who and for how long they will split the debate time. During that time, majority and minority whips will ensure that they have the vote counts that they want or that they need, and the House will then vote. When the House votes and it is approved, the bill will be sent to the Senate or to a conference committee or finally to the President. Or the House could vote to kill it. Here's a brief comparison of the House and the Senate and the way that they do the legislative process, which is going to bring us to our third and final section. We're almost done. The House and the Senate are really two different places. They're different worlds of the legislative process. While the basics of the process remain similar, there are some critical differences that need to be understood. Chief among those differences is the floor procedures. When a bill is introduced in the Senate, it is given a number. It is read twice and referred to its respective committees. And if it survives, it is returned to the floor for debate. Unlike the House with its restrictions and limitations, the Senate debates are an unrestrained, all-out cage match of rhetorical bravado. Senators take pride in being members of what is often called the quote-unquote greatest deliberative body in the world. Just imagine Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid's wrinkly skin all oiled up in their spandex singlets going head-to-head in the ultimate Monday Night Raw clash of legislative titans. Speaking of McConnell and Reid, majority and minority leaders work together to negotiate what is called unanimous consent agreements. This is to set the rules of debate for proposed legislation that must be approved by all the members. In other words, the rules for debate are only effective if no senator objects. 100 senators, 100 of them have to be on board with the rules of debate. Unanimous consent agreements usually limit the amount of floor time to be devoted to a particular issue and the number of possible amendments that may be offered. There is, however, something called the possibility of something called a hold, which could prevent a measure from reaching a vote on the Senate floor. Holds are measures to postpone a vote by allowing the senator to study the legislation further and its impact on his or her state. And we should put studying in quotation marks because this is really an attempt to postpone voting. They're just claiming that they're going to read it as an excuse to postpone the vote. During debate, senators can also use something called the filibuster as an attempt to talk a bill to death. This is a really powerful tool of the opposition or the minority party. In 2015, the Senator Rand Paul filibustered 10.5 hours to undermine his own party's attempt at furthering government surveillance programs through the Patriot Act. Right, so in 1957, you had this really famous filibuster by Strom Thurmond, the Republican senator from South Carolina, in protest of the Civil Rights Act, and it went on for 24 hours and 18 minutes. And this is Strom Thurmond at 100 years old. Kind of gross. Both filibusters and holds can be overridden by what's called a cloture, a vote of 3/5 of the Senate to end the hold or the filibuster. So 60 votes can stop a filibuster or end a hold and force it to go to the floor for voting. When the Senate is ready to vote, it may do so, and if it is approved, it is either sent to the House or to a conference committee where those differences will be worked out so that they can submit it to the president. One of the final things that we need to know about the president when he gets a bill, he can either sign that bill into law or veto it. The veto power is a powerful tool of the president that can be used in opposition to a bill, and we will discuss that further in class.